everyone to our poetry night at the library. Second, third. Thank you. I'm very excited for tonight. A few things to mention beforehand. First off, the Friends of the Library are now the folks that are supporting the poetry nights, so they help us send an honorarium to the poet and also buy a copy of the book for the collection. Yes, so it's exciting that the poetry nights, like the Friends, they like to help the programs at the library, and they knew that poetry nights were wonderful, so they are helping out, so that's exciting. Speaking of poetry, there is going to be another poetry night at Linfield next week on the Wednesday the 15th. It's at the Nicholson Library at 5:30, and it's Annie Lampman, who they had scheduled for a few months ago, and she rescheduled. So it's really exciting when Linfield also does poetry things, and then it's like 2 poetry events a month, and it's very exciting. But yeah, thank you for taking the literature that is on your seats, including next month we're going to be moving to the Aaron Hansen Gallery and doing a special paintings to poems for our December poetry night, and it's going to be really cool and a lot of fun. There's more information. Anyway, thank you for that. We'll go ahead and get started. Let me introduce our poet. Armin Tolentino earned his MFA at Rutgers University in Newark. He is the author of We Meant to Bring It Home Alive from 2019, and his poetry has appeared in Hyphen Magazine, Arsenic Lobster, The Raven Chronicles, and elsewhere. I think poetry and literary journals have the best names sometimes. It's like band names and literary journals. They're both cool. Originally from Lincoln Park, New Jersey, you now live in Vancouver, Washington, with his wife and her 3 chinchillas. You're an Oregon Literary Arts Fellowship recipient, an avid but unusually unsuccessful fisherman, and hopes one day to earn a Guinness record for world's loudest clap. Thank you. Armin?
Hi, it's good to see you all. McMinnville, this is special to be here. It's especially special to be at a library because libraries are the vanguard of learning and justice in our communities. And whenever you see various forms of oppression in our communities, they're starting with libraries. And they're trying to shut down voices. So whatever we can do to rally around spaces like this that are open to all in our community, we must show up for them. So thank you for being here. One other thing is there's a open mic sign up back there. Is that accurate? Yep. Okay, and so I don't know if the camera sees you, so you can raise your hand really small. Do this, like do a little small raise if you're planning to read at the open mic. Okay, I see a few hands. I don't see all the hands. I don't see all the hands yet. And what I would offer is that I will not be offended if you ignore me and walk over there to put your name down. It would actually be a gift to us to hear you read, because spaces like this exist so that we can be in community with each other. And I am grateful to be in community with you all, but I go back to Vancouver tonight. And you all are still building that community of writers amongst each other. And I would hope that your voice is part of this evening. That would mean a lot to me. So thank you all for letting me be part of your evening tonight. And I feel like I'm screaming in the silent room, which is the most offensive thing to do. I'm sorry. Can you all hear me okay? Not cool? Okay. Let's read some poems. This poem is called Caterpillars. When we were little, we'd delight in the season of caterpillars. They'd crawl on the trees, and we'd scoop up a couple to wriggle in our palms or tickle our legs. When I moved away, I learned most people call them leeches. But where I was born, we had so few words, everything had to share a name or went its existence unmentioned. For example, wolf could mean pet, but also mother, or rusted machine, or tree where tired angels rest. When I first moved, believe me, there were lots of misunderstandings. I just point to things constantly. That's what I mean. You call it what? A gaggle of caterpillars could nuzzle a dead wolf down to bone in a few hours. That was great joy and relief, especially if the wolf belonged to one of us. Where I was born, love meant blind, the tea that soothes stomach ulcers, or anything you felt all the way to your pinky toes. I've been away a long time from where I was born, but every now and then, I still make mistakes. I'll reminisce and share a memory like the troll we loved to rub as kids in the woods. And when I get blank stares, I just say, oh, I guess you had to be there. Which I've learned in my new home means connection, lost, reboot. Or I've given up on trying. Or you will never know the real me. All right. Thank you, thank you. A poem about words and how complicated words are, how complicated language is. Let me read some poems about fishing. Thank you for sharing that I am a bumbling, a failed fisher person. I've caught things, not as much as I would desire. I also love that you shared this this bio that said that my wife has 3 chinchillas and she still does. But I am so worried for the moment where someone reads that out and I'm like, oh, it's actually 2 right now. We're down to 1. They're doing good. And I hope every day I come home that they're still doing good. And at some point they won't be. And that's what life is all about. And that's why I rewrite poems. Where are my fisher folk? People who fish? Fish? Okay, okay. You're hesitant because you know that I'm going to come to you after here and be like, okay, where am I supposed to go tonight? I don't have all my gear in the car, but I coulda. I've been thinking about fishing a lot because the vocabulary of fishing is very interesting, right? And anything you love becomes part of your writing. So the vocabulary and then the metaphors you build off of it. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. So let me read some fishing poems for you all. Improved clinch knot. To undo this knot, you need a knife. That is, it's irreversible. Rehearse it in real weather. Remorseless February as you fuddle the loops. 7, 13, whatever numerology quiets your doubt in the weakest point of the rig. That is, the number does and does not matter. There is a right and a wrong way to do this, and in between, a gray sea of luck. As you pull the ends towards finality, at some point, unless you are willing to cut it all off and start over, you have no choice but to keep on tightening to the knot's conclusion. No matter if the loops are bunched wrongly, clumsy disorder, you must continue like years ago when Mama fed me milkfish and a pin bone thorned itself in the narthex of my throat. Maybe close enough for her to eel her finger in and scoop it out. But instead, she realized in the sudden winter of her terror, we were too far gone and could only move forward. So instead, shoved fingerfuls of rice in my mouth, an avalanche of sticky grains, catching the bone until, interminable minutes later, it finished the path into my stomach's midnight. You'll know that feeling too when you doubt you're not and cast anyway into the evening and wait to see if your luck holds fast. Thank you. The word ninang means like godmother in Tagalog, in one of the main languages of the Philippines. Ninang. Ninang Maricel's bait shop and house of oriental grotesqueries. A tub of night crawlers. That's all I was after. And beer, if they sold any. The last dry night of fall. Last chance to pull the bullheads from the river before they dig their flat, hard heads beneath the scum for winter. But the door blows open before I can touch it. And Ninang chants my name 3 times as if we've met before and asks, "Have you called your inay?" But I can tell she knows the answer, and I'm ashamed to look at her. Our people never would eat from this river. These fish are fleshed with mud. Mama, I know, is in my childhood home tonight, taking the hair I shed in her living room from a time when we still talked, each strand pinched between the only 2 fingers that still have feeling. And from them will weave a doll she'll pray for every evening. Santa Maria, Inay ng Dios. Ninang doesn't ask me to close the door, daring me to step forward. The wind bites my neck, and I learn to survive it. Sometimes God closes a door, I was taught, or opens a window, or does whatever he wants, clothed in divinity. But it's my choice to come inside if I dare face the grotesqueness of not knowing what's next. My hand, the hook in the river, on faith, waiting to be swallowed. Thank you. Okay. Let me do one more of these fish poems, and I think I'll shift some gear. Y'all know what a bullhead is? Bullhead? Okay, they're these really tiny catfish, unloved. Unloved, and the metaphors of that are very fascinating to me too, because it's fascinating to me to think about what is valued or not, right? And in the world of fishing, what's really interesting are what's considered trash fish versus game fish. And trash fish are often the ones that actually are resident to the ecosystem. It's the bass that are the game fish, but they don't belong anywhere west of the Mississippi. You know, these are fish that were brought in, panfish, and so I'm fascinated by that, and the question of belonging and what we care about, and what we don't. And also, I would just love to do a catfish fry if I could catch enough of these things. And people tell me they're so easy to catch, and for some reason, I have never caught enough to actually do a catfish fry. But you got to catch them at night. That's what people tell me. And so I fish at night sometimes, even though it's creepy. Could be fishing at night. There's a lot of weirdos out there besides me, and a lot of splashing in the water. But this is not autobiographical, but sort of autobiographical. Midnight penance. 3 hours out of water, gut hooked and writhing in a bucket wasn't enough to passively kill the bullhead. I knew just how much life it still had when I dipped the fillet knife behind its adipose fin and dug a swift notch to carve away its back. Quick work usually, but it flinched like its whole body was a single muscle cramped. The hardness of flesh bracing itself against the riptide of stunning pain. And knowing I'd done wrong, I could have pulled the knife from the cut and jammed it instead between the eyes to pike the brain. The mercy of decisiveness. But instead, I kept sawing that wretched back as the fish curled itself into a seizure. And I finished the journey of my mistake at its neck, where I finally leaned my weight down to snap the spine, and the fish went slack. Shoved pliers into the gap, and I pinched the backbone's broken end, so white and conspicuous it was never meant to have wind touch it. And with my thumb in the open gore of a dangling head, pulled apart to release the edible from the waste. But a clutch of eggs spilled forth on the blood-stained cutting board. A pupil dotted each orange sphere, each a North Star of its own galaxy extinguished. I was hungry for nothing but sleep, but still I lit a fire to roast the fish without salt and saved the black bloodline for last, which I let melt on my tongue like a greasy Eucharist until I recited 5 Hail Marys and swallowed. A few frosted breaths before dawn, I completed this liturgy and buried the spine and the eggs in the garden. Oh, okay, that was depressing enough. Let's switch gear to some other depressing poems, maybe. I got some time. You know what? I'm gonna try something here. I got a ukulele on me. I play the ukulele every now and then. I'm gonna play you all a song. Can you see me okay there? Do I have to stand here? Is that okay? So first, I'm not like a musician. I play this thing. I think I can play something passable. I don't write songs. So I wanted, though, to try this because a few reasons. One, it's scary. It's scary to try doing this in front of you all. And I think it's good to try scary things every now and then in a somewhat contained and protective environment. And hopefully you don't make me regret that choice. But similarly, if you're like, I don't know if I should read a poem or not, well, this dude just picked up a ukulele. So maybe you should put your name down to read a poem, right? So that's one reason. The other reason, and maybe I'm already talking to the choir about this, but you might know friends who say, man, I love reading, but I just can't get into poetry. You have those friends? I just don't get poetry, right? first, I am not here to tell you you have to be into anything or not. What I will offer is that poetry is our oldest verbal art form, right? So much older than novels, by far. Older than plays, right? Older than essays, by far. And it predates written language by a lot too. So if there is something that is so important to us as a species over time, and you have to imagine that this art form existed amongst all versions of our species, then maybe there's a value to it to you today. And also maybe this world is hard, and there's a lot of stuff going on in this world, and why would you not add another thing to your toolkit to survive this world? And if it's one as available, as accessible as poetry, reading it, writing it, why would you deprive yourself of that? So I will play you all a song that I didn't write because I think a lot of people who say, I don't get poetry, I don't like poetry, they tend to like songs. And they tend to like songs with words. And they actually care about the words. You know how I know this? Because I don't know I can't tell ages, but I'm from a generation, maybe you are too, that didn't have internet when we were growing up. Does that sound familiar? So you would hear a song and you would not be able to Google it to figure out what the words are. And then the words you remembered in your head were the right words. So then when you learned the real words, like those Elton John songs, and you found out what the real words are, you were so disappointed. Because you're like, no, my version was the right version. Because the words mattered. And if the words matter, then that means poetry matters, right? Okay. I'm going to take a sip here. And this might be a disaster, but hey, whatever. I got another 20 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, let's give this a shot. I didn't write this song. Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. Sing along if you know it. This is ground control to Major Tom, where you really made the grade. And the papers want to know who should you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door. And I'm floating in a most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. For here am I floating in my tin can. Far above the world. Planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do. Good enough. I don't have any feedback. Good enough, right? Good enough. I didn't write that song. It's by a guy named David Bowie, called Space Oddity. And I guess another thing about that is, first, I don't think David Bowie knew anyone named Major Tom. I have not looked it up. I don't think he knows anyone named Major Tom. I don't think he knows any astronauts personally. I don't know if he knows any astronauts that are sort of stuck in space. He made it up, and that was completely okay, and it was fun, and people enjoyed it. And when you write, you can make things up. And you can write about whatever you feel like writing about. So maybe I will close out with some poems about someone lost in space. Because I wrote a bunch of poems because I like that song. And I also like the song by Elton John called Rocket Man. And I liked a song that you might not be as familiar with by a band called At the Drive-In, which was very popular in the late 90s. And they had this song about a guy who was trying to write a letter, but he was lost in space. And I thought that was very fascinating. And then I also read a book called Moby Dick, which maybe you've read. And I found it very fascinating to think, you know, when I complain about my workday, I'm complaining about 8 to 9 hours. That's my workday, and that's what I'm complaining about. And whalers, their workday was 3 years. You were working for about 3 years, and you didn't know if when you came home, the people you loved were still there. You would sometimes see a ship passing, going the other way, going back to port, right? Going back to where you came from, and you would exchange letters saying, oh, if someone is still there for me, give them this. Wow. Wow. And so the power of language, the power of words. Okay, let me finish out with a few poems from this collection, ostensibly about a guy lost in space. But let me start with this first, which is about a whaling ship in the 1800s. Dragon Scrimshaw. We meant to bring it home alive. The dragon we found writhing on the ice fields of the Arctic Sea, stranded by its shattered wing, fixed its helpless weight to the ship's side and offered it our rationed meat. Try as we did to rinse its yellow eyes of salt, still it died. One harpooner plucked a tooth to Scrimshaw. Captain found out about the thieving Scrimshander, lashed his legs 7 times, screaming that a dead dragon was still worth more than 1,000 barrels of oil. The salt would preserve it. But we begged to cut it loose, let it sink into the sea. Too heavy to tow, and sharks were nipping chunks of meat from its belly. But Captain said the corpse would pay its weight in gold. We sailed a slow route home, the extra weight a burden, without wailing, killed time with smoke, and Scrimshaw dreamt of women soaked in syrup and wine who would meet us at port. In spring, we crossed Cancer, and skies erupted as if the dragon had breathed its doomed flames into the thunderclaps. The sea turned black beneath us. The storm waged an assault. The deck punished with rain until each man was swallowed by salt water or stabbed by screws of lightning. Except me. The weight of the first mate's body sheltered me until the heartbeat of the sea slowed to near stillness. I drifted alone and scrimshawed my daughter's name on teeth I pulled from the mouth of the dragon to count each passing day. By 30,000, I'd run out of meat, hardtack, and cod. I sliced the creature's back, cubes of scaly meat I dried on the deck, old gray flesh packed hard with salt. When one day I saw the sun eclipsed by a swarm of dragons, I knew I'd never see my home again. The weight of their shadows smothered me as they crossed heaven. I scrimshawed my question to God on vertebrae as I drifted a borderless sea. I've tossed out the spyglass because I know what I'll see. Blue on blue horizon where sky and water meet. I've burned the sails for soot to color my scrimshaw. I never seem to run out of bones. I drink buckets of salt water, but I never seem to run out of life. I wait for nothing, and nothing comes as the centuries drag on. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, let me finish out with a couple more poems here. This has been lovely reading with you all. Okay, so the first third of this poem, the last third of this poem is about extinction and apocalypse. So there's some dinosaurs. I want to write about some dinosaurs, so I got to get some dinosaurs in there. And the middle section is about a lot of various creatures and people just failing at relationships in life. But this first third is about a guy named Space Boy, because I couldn't come up with a name, and he's lost in space. But what was more interesting to me was the voice of his brother, who's on Earth and just sort of waiting for him. So let me read a couple of those poems in the voice of his brother who's on Earth and thinking about a person he misses. Space Boy's first mission, age 12. A dozen poplar logs, dried and light as styrofoam, dragged from the forest and fastened with jute we snuck from Dad's toolbox. Summer vacation, testing buoyancy on the lake from whose center an island bloomed, glittering alien planet, and no way to know how many fathoms we'd sink if our knots should relax or the wood suck too much water. The night before our launch, I asked, "What do you think we'll find?" He was packing provisions, fish hooks, compass, chocolate chip cookies, a book mapping stars. Mammoth bones or ruins, probably, he shrugged. Just hope we don't see any dragons. Whalers used to say, a dragon at sea meant you'd never make it back home. Next morning, I faked sickness and confessed to our parents the summer-long project when he didn't come home by dinner. Dad borrowed a neighbor's skiff, and my brother was grounded, telescope privileges forbidden as well. He wouldn't even look at me. At least you didn't see a dragon, I said. He stared out the window. It was dark too soon already. His anger, my gratitude, 2 stars to navigate us to the equinox. His words fogged the window. How do you know I didn't? Thank you. And one last poem for you all. This is when Space Boy and his brother are a bit older. And in Space Boy, his brother's voice. A letter that Space Boy never received. You wouldn't know, at T-7, I shut my eyes from the shuttle's exhaust, a blossom of orange that burned itself into gray. Couldn't shake the feeling you just strapped yourself inside the throat of a dragon. The crowd sang goodbye. At 0, you broke the thick quilt of cumulus, but I never watched you go. Another confession. This summer, we built a log raft with twine, a handbook on knots, and no knowledge of nautical physics. I wasn't too sick to join in the journey. Just a co-pilot frozen by the unshakable thought the lake was alive and halfway across would love us too much to ever let us go. If I sank, what would Mom have to lay in my coffin? Would my soul snap loose from its anchor of bones? How would it find the surface? That morning, you sailed, offered the prow to the water's give, but I witnessed nothing. Locked in the bathroom, crying too much to wish you good luck. Since blastoff, I've trained my eyes to stay open, to stare at stretches of sky without tiring. So patient, I now can spot black migrations of midges against empty miles of blue. Brother, I promise I will not blink. I will not flinch. Pull back this time. I will not miss 1 second of your return. Thank you all so much.